Okay, hey, welcome. This is Paul Brutsman with the Casper College Drafting and Design and Machine Tool Department. And I want to go over kind of the machining of a carburetor spacer today. Some of the key concepts I want to discuss are drilling, NC 2-axis drilling, pocketing, and contouring, and then of course verification of those. So we're going to be bringing in a SolidWorks file, so we'll just get started with that. First step we got to do is go to File, Open. And if we want to bring in a SolidWorks file, we have to change the file type to SolidWorks files. And there you'll see I have a carbspacer.sldprt, which is the SolidWorks extension for a part file. And we're going to click Open. And you'll notice immediately I've got the front view here, not real descriptive, so I'm going to go up to View and go Isometric. And then I'm going to shade the view so I can look at it. And then you'll notice there's my carb spacer. Now one of the most important concepts in Surfcam to get started is you have to realize you got to get your part orientation correct. So if you want to look at how the tool is looking at it for a 3-axis mill, if I go View, Top View, that's how the tool is looking at the part. And you can see that's not going to work. It's actually looking at one of these sides of the part. So if I go back to View Isometric, what I have to do is I have to basically take this part and flip it down so that this plane, the plane that the 4 holes are in, is parallel or on my XY plane. The X is the red arrow, Y is the green, and Z is the blue. A little hard to see with this shaded plane in the way, but take my word for that. So here's how we do it. One key thing to remember in Surfcam is all rotation happens about the C view, Z-axis, the construction view, Z-axis, and how we change that right now. If I were to rotate it, it would just spin like a top. My Z-axis is vertical. If I were to rotate it, it would not help us out at all. So we're going to put our C view pointing to the right side of the model, and you'll notice the Z-axis is now pointing to the right side. So when I rotate it about that axis, we're going to get the orientation that we want. Please ignore this red arrow. It's for another axis of machining that we're not doing. So here we go. To rotate it now, we go Transform, Move, Rotate. Lower left-hand side of the screen, very important in Surfcam. Rotation in C view, select items to move. If everything on my screen, if it's within the screen, this will not work. It'll miss the top geometry. If everything's within my view, I can click Visible and enter rotation angle of 90 and say OK. And now lower left hand side of the screen says select the point of rotation. I'm going to go keyboard 000. I like to rotate about this point. It's easy to keep track of the model. And then you'll see we've got a good start. If I go to View, Top View now, that's how the tool is looking at the part. That makes more sense. I'm going to go back to Isometric View. Now the only thing I got to do is check where my Z is. And you'll notice that my Z0 looks to be at the bottom of the part, and I want my Z0 to be the top of the part. So we're almost there. What I need to do is move this part down. Remember, the part moves, the origin stays fixed. So I'm just going to go Transform, Move, Distance. Again, if everything's visible, let me go back. I'm going to turn on Multi-Select. I'm going to turn it on. If everything's visible and I click Visible, it all lights up, telling me that's what it's going to move. And I'm going to move the part down in Z -1 inch. And it looks to be correct now. We're going to, of course, verify that. I'm going to go to View, Isometric View. I'm going to put my C view back in Top View. And now I'm going to go Analyze Element, Analyze Location. And I just want to know what the end point of this line's at. And sure enough, it's at Z0, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so we're off to a good start here. Now I'm going to turn off my surfaces layer. I really don't need to see those anymore. I'm going to make current by double-clicking my wireframe layer. And here's my model. The first thing that I'd like to do, now that I've got the orientation done, and you'll want to hit save at this point because you've kind of reached some benchmark or milestone, is we're going to start creating tool paths. So to do that, it's a pretty simple process. We're going to start by using a 1/2 inch 90-degree spot drill. We're going to spot drill these 4 holes, not only for accurate location but also to get a chamfer on them so we get really sharp edges. So we're going to go NC 2-axis drill. In the lower left hand corner of the screen says select points and or circles for drilling, so we're going to select this circle, this one, all 4 circles, and say done. And it says this, asks us, shows us this dialog box, the 2-axis hole process dialog box. We're going to select the tool. We're going to grab a spot drill, a 1/2 inch 90-degree spot drill, and we'll say OK. And you can see it's a 1/2 inch 90-degree spot drill. That's going to be our first tool. Our work offset's G54, and that's why it's so important to have some G-code experience underneath your belt. You'll kind of understand why it's asking you these different things. We're going to select material. We're going to go with 6061 aluminum, and we're going to stick with all of Surfcam's feeds and speeds, though we got to be careful with that at times. But for this demonstration, we'll go with those. The cycle. Well, our rapid plane is 1.1 inches. Our plunge clearance is 0.1. We're okay with all that. It's a spot drill cycle. I don't really need it to dwell. And the spot drill diameter it's going to give us, well, we didn't really look and see what size our holes were so that we know what size to do a spot drill diameter. So we're going to hit cancel here. And we're going to have to go to Analyze Element and look at the diameter of those. And they're 332. Obviously probably a clearance for our 5/16. Now that we know that, and so we'd want our chamfer to be larger than 332, we're going to go NC 2-axis drill again. Pick the holes that we want to drill. Just like that. We'll say done. We'll go back and get our tool again. We'll make it tool 1, length offset 1, work offset 54. Material is still aluminum. We'll go to cycle control. We're looking at these. We've been through all this once. But now we're going to, the spot drill diameter is 375. I think I'm going to go to 400 on that. Put a nice countersink on those holes. And say OK. And you'll notice it says, do you want to accept or reject? I'm going to accept. And the green lines that you see, those are your drilling cycle. Alright. So far so good. What I'd like to do next is drill the 332 hole through each of those. But I also would like to drill a 332 hole in the center for my end mill to plunge into. So we've got to create a circle at the origin. That's simple enough. We're going to go create a circle. Its center diameter. It doesn't really matter, but we might as well make it match the others. And its location is at 0, 0, and make sure you change that to 0. It keeps the last value that was in there. And say OK, and you'll notice there's a circle there. Now all those circles do in Surfcam when you drill is locate the center point of the drill. You can put a 1-inch drill through that 332 hole. It doesn't care. It doesn't size the drill according to the wireframe. It just simply puts the drill at the center point of that geometry. So again, we're going to do NC 2-axis drill. What are we going to drill? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 holes, and the 5th one in the center. We'll say done. And now we got to go get a tool. So we're going to go grab a drill now. A drill. We got to go get a 332 drill. Those of you may know what size that is. Some of you might not. It's letter Q. We'll say OK. That's going to be our second tool in our lineup. Again, work offset G54. We're going to stick with Surfcam's feeds and speeds, though they're fairly aggressive. You all probably can appreciate that and understand it. This may be approaching the max RPM of your machine anyways, a 7200, maybe 7500 RPM spindle. Under cycle control, we got our rapid plane at 1.1 inches. It's then going to plunge to 0.1. I'm going to have it do a pecking cycle. And I'm going to have it peck about every 0.2 inches. Okay? That's where the drill goes in and out, clears the chips. The depth I'm going to do to the shoulder of my drill, and my part is 1 inch thick. If you missed that, or if you forgot to measure that, you can click this right here, and it'll say, hey, pick the elements, and I'm going to say, hey, how thick is my part from this endpoint to this endpoint, and it's 1 inch. Now, if my shoulder of my drill goes to 1 inch, I need to go slightly past. I'm going to choose 50 thousandths so that it actually clears through the part. I'm going to go click OK. And there's our drilling cycle. A little common sense applies. You know, we rotate it and we look, and we expect the tip of the drill to be beyond the bottom of the part some. So that's great. You know, you get to this point, don't forget to hit save. Definitely important. Easy to forget. Surfcam crashes. You have to start over. Okay, so we've got our holes now drilled and our plunge hole for our end mill drill. Things are looking pretty good at this point. I guess the next thing we need to do is probably, we need to start on the pocketing on the center or the milling side of this project. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to change the color of the boundary of this pocket by going to Edit Color. Pick a color that stands out. And I'm going to go around and select. Make sure your multi-select is on. If it's off, turn it on. It shows you what you're selecting. And say Done. Done. And now you can see that my wireframe geometry stands out a little better. That's the boundary of my pocket. It's as simple as that. Okay, now I'm going to pocket that out. So we're going to go NC 2-axis pocket. I like to go auto because it'll chain my geometry automatically. And if I pick this, now that I changed its color, it all lights up saying, hey, is this the boundary of the pocket? Yes it is, so I'm done. And then here I need to go plunge. Plunge my end mill at the center of this circle right there. And done. And done. And now we're off to the races. We need to go get our end mill. We're going to use a 5/8 2-flute end mill. That's going to be tool number 3 in this process. We're going to again stick with Surfcam's feeds and speeds for this material. Cut control, we want to climb cut on a CNC. We're going to spiral out the pocket. That's just the way the cut path is. It's going to start in the center and spiral its way out. Leave the curve tolerance at 1 thou. Plenty accurate for what we're doing. Rapid plane plunge clearance. We picked the top of the geometry, hence top. How much we want to remove in Z? Well, your initial inclination is probably to put 1 inch, but we want the bottom of the end mill to go slightly past, so we might have to go 1 inch 50 thousandths or something like that. And the rough spacing, I want to do this in 2 equal passes, so I'm going to go, if I put a 1/2 inch, it's going to do a half, and there's going to be 50 thou left at the bottom to cut, so it'll actually take 3 passes on the Z level. So let's go 5/25, and I'll do it in 2 equal passes. Mount to remove on sides, rough spacing, we're going to stick with Surfcam's default of 1/4 inch step over. We're going to do 1 finish pass at 5 thou. Get a nice surface finish on that. We'll say OK, and I guess we'll just say accept, and if you take a look, you can see the tool paths in Surfcam. Now we're going to go to a verify here. I'm going to go to view isometric. I'd like to take a look at some of this. Problem is, if you jump right up here to toolpath verification, okay, it says no stock found. In other words, it doesn't know the piece of the stock, the size of the piece of the stock you're starting with. It has no idea. So we have to tell it that. It's really simple. You go up to your operations manager, highlight setup 1, right click, edit setup information, and go to stock. Okay, stock tab. Here I can just say, give me a geometry bounding box around all my geometry. Now, that's kind of the quick way of doing it. However, if you know the size of the workpiece that you're working on, you need to enter those coordinates, okay, relative to your 0, 0, 0, which is in the center of the part in this case. But I'm going to cheat here and just go geometry bounding box, and it just puts a box around the outermost limits of your geometry, which is actually fine. In practice, we would probably have it slightly larger so that we weren't trying to size the workpiece to exactly the size of this outside dimensions. You want a little bit of material to machine away. But for this demonstration, it'll be perfect. We'll click OK, add, OK. And now Surfcam knows the size of our workpiece before we start, so therefore it can do a verification for us. Now my suggestion is slow this way down first few times. There's our spot drill, there's our drill, there's our end mill. That probably wasn't even slow enough, so we'll bring it down some more. Hit stop and replay. Alright, we're off to a good start here. And you notice if you zoom in, you can see the through hole. And you can see the slight countersink that we achieved with the spot drill. Now we're going to close that box. Again, I would hit save if I were you. You've hit another milestone in this project. There are times when these tool paths start to get in the way, become annoying visually. So you can simply click up here and say hide them. And now they're gone. Now they're still here. We can turn them back on by clicking on any of them and saying show me the toolpath. Alright, I'm going to hide that again. Now we need to do the outside contour. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to edit the color. Pick some color that will show up. I'm going to try orange. And I'm going to simply work my way around here, making sure to get every piece of this. Now, there's quicker ways to do this and more efficient ways, but beginning class, beginning concepts, let's make sure we know what we're doing here before we have Surfcam do a lot of this stuff for us. I think I got them all. We'll say done. And there's our outside wireframe geometry. Go to view isometric. Now, the process we're going to use for this is an NC 2-axis contour. We're going to contour the outside. So NC 2-axis contour. I'm going to click auto, in other words chain it for me automatically, and because I changed the color and all that, click it once, everything was selected on the outside. I'm going to say done, done. Now it's kind of nice, we're going to use the same 5/8 end mill, so all this information is correct, but glance at it, verify that. Cut control, we're still going to climb cut, all this is still applicable. But how far to go in Z? Well, same discussion, a little more than an inch. We're going to do it in 2 passes, so we want to do it 525 at a time. 2 times that's 1 inch 50. Okay. Now the amount to remove on sides is going to be a little tricky because we don't want to leave coupons. We don't want to leave drops. We want to turn everything to chips. So we got to estimate how far it is from our chained profile to the outside dimension of our actual stock, our piece of billet. Well, let's just give it a stab. Let's put in 1/2 inch. We can always come back and change it. Rough spacing, 1/4 of an inch at a time. It's a Surfcam default. We'll stick with it. We'll do 1 finish pass at 5 thou to clean it up. We'll say OK to that. The lower left hand side of the screen, as always in Surfcam, is so important. Pick side to contour. You just need to pick somewhere on the outside of that contour. And we'll click accept, and you can see the pass. There's your first pass on the Z, the second pass, first pass, second pass, and then the final finishing pass over the whole 1 inch height. Alright, let's verify that. I'm going to go to isometric view. I'm going to go to verify, take a look at it. Slow it way down, try to slow it down even more than we did before. There's our spot drill, our 5/8 end mill, taking out the pocket, and now it's going around the outside of the part. So it's looking really good at this point. Remember to hit save. You've hit another milestone on this path, so be sure to be careful with that, and don't forget to hit save or you'll lose everything. Alright, so we've graphically verified the program. The only thing we got left to do here is to go in and take a look at the setup page, create a setup sheet. We're going to do that. Click on the setup, the entire setup, and output the tooling setup and the graphics. I'll kind of show you how I prefer to do this. If you pick the graphics for the tools, it shows you pictures of each of those. It may apply in some academic setting, not so sure it applies out in industry. Oftentimes we don't really like that. So when we click setup, we'll time clock setup sheet. We're going to get rid of the graphics, the tooling graphics. I'd like to see the tooling setup and the operation setup is all. And if you can tweak this for the rapids for your particular machine and the time it takes to take tools. And oftentimes we'll look at this, kind of gives us some more information, tells us the tools and whatnot. Let's close that. This is the one I prefer to look at. It's the operations list. So again, you decide which you want. You click the setup one, click the time clock. If you don't want to see the tooling setup, you just want to see the output operation setup, you click OK, and that takes you to what I like, which is the operations list. It gives me the tools, their number, their description, and I always tell people to look at the minimum Z and do a common sense check of this column to make sure you don't have anything going into the flew the workpiece into the vise or the table. Gives you the approximate cycle time. Lots of good data here. This is something you'd print out, take out to the shop with you when you're setting up the machine or if somebody else is setting it up. My suggestion is also get this off the printer and put where the X, Y, and Z0 is for the part. I wish Surfcam would come up with some type of way to do that for you automatically, but they haven't yet, so it's nice to know where that's at. It's hard to remember that a year from now. Alright, so that'll about do it for this session of Surfcam. Good luck, and talk to you later.